Anything Ghost, number 312. Welcome to Anything Ghost. My name is Lex Wall. Anything Ghost is a place where people send their personal paranormal experiences, aka ghost stories, or a local ghost legend, and I read them to you on the show. We're going to hit various places on the planet today. We're going to go to Canada, the US, and Japan. So stick around for episode number 312. Okay, we'll get things started with a story from Stephen in Japan. The Apparition on 6 Buddha's Hill. I sent in a story several years ago while I was staying in Aoita, Japan. It was a case of sleep paralysis. A lot of water has passed under many bridges since then, and after many years of working for the Japanese government in one of their offices based in London, by curious turn of events, I found myself back in Japan, this time for good. I have been settled in a city in northern Kyushu for almost 7 years now. Having quit my old job and life back in England, I made the decision to return to Japan to live. Northern Kyushu is famed for its history, and it boasts a wealth of mysterious and arcane places, temples, shrines, wind-swept hillside graves, lonely rock-strewn beaches, all very endearing and atmospheric. There is much ancient lore here. The account I'm about to relate took place a few months ago in April of this year, and is all the more strange and remarkable since it happened in broad daylight, in the early morning, moreover. By way of background, I need to mention a little about the place, the hill upon which the strange, unnerving occurrence took place. The hill, a long, gradually sloping road covering about a kilometer, isn't actually known as 6 Buddha's Hill. In Japan, streets often have no name, since people normally refer to places by which block in which town or district they might be in. Of course, some of the cities do have named streets, often for historic or other reasons, but generally speaking, the streets themselves are nameless. Hence, the nomenclature of convenience is of my own making. Near the top of the hill is an alcove containing several small statues of Buddhist deities known as Jizo. These small statues, about a height of a small child, maybe 120 to 130 centimeters, are often seen in Japan, and are tutelary deities chiefly responsible for the care and protection of children and unborn fetuses due to miscarriage or abortion. I'm not sure why there is an alcove built into the side of the hill at this point. The locals I have asked here have no idea, only that these statues have been there for as long as anyone can remember. Offerings are often left at the alcove, such as flowers and small china vases, together with incense sticks. They were laid there by a person unknown, probably a mourning mother for her stillborn or the aborted life of another child. This may or may not have some significance, as I speculate later in the account. It was a weekday morning, about 7:15, and I was on my way to work, which lay in a neighboring town beyond the hill. The weather was bright and sunny, and visibility was very clear. I was sitting at the back of the bus, trundling its way up the hill on the way to the top. On the left side of the road, the side that the bus was driving along, there are several nondescript apartment blocks, one of which, a 2-story brown-colored affair, I was idly looking at as we passed. I had seen the building on countless previous occasions, this hill being my regular route to work, and the bus was my regular method of transport. The doors, 4 to a level, were always closed, and I assumed that most of the cheap apartments were untenanted, having never seen anyone entering or leaving the building, either on my way to or from my place of work. However, this time, there was someone. A figure. A young Japanese woman of about 30 years of age, I would hazard. Pale of complexion, as if without makeup, highly irregular in Japan for women to be outside with the barest trace of foundation of eyeliner, personal experience being very important for all genders here in Japan. So this immediately struck me as odd. What was she doing outside like that? She was dressed in a simple shift-like black one-piece dress, timeless in terms of fashion. It could have been contemporary. It could have as well been a garment from several centuries ago. Straight black, undyed, unadorned black shoulder-length hair, without any jewelry or accessories. She stood outside the closed door of the endmost apartment, standing at the railing and looking out across the other side of the road. I say the other side of the road, but it was difficult to ascertain, for she had the queerest, most inexplicable expression on her face, still like a photograph, and the way that people look in photographs. They are not totally looking at you, they are looking through you, or at another time or place, long gone. Transfixed, I kept my eyes trained on this strange figure. A matter of seconds later, the bus passed a telephone pole, situated on the street between my line of vision and the figure of the woman. For a split second, the pole coming by momentarily blocked my view, and when it passed, a mere millisecond or two after, the woman had vanished. It was as though she had blinked out like a light. One moment she was there, the next gone, leaving the building, as it always had been before, untenanted, and devoid of any human presence. My eyes had never left my line of sight, even for a millisecond. It was utterly baffling. As the bus moved on, I craned my neck back to see if she had gone down the middle stairway, or had somehow hidden herself on the balcony, or swiftly entered the apartment behind her. But she would have had the speed of a bird to achieve anything like that. Surely impossible. It confounded me for the rest of the journey. But after getting to work, I put it to the back of my mind. A few days later, relaxing with some Japanese friends at an izakaya, which is a kind of casual pub in Japan that serves drinks and a variety of small appetizing dishes cooked on a grill, I told them of my bizarre experience on Six Buddha's Hill. "Oh, you definitely saw a ghost," one friend quipped assuredly. "Perhaps it was an ubume," another one added. "That's a woman who died while pregnant or during birth. It was Six Buddha's Hill, right? So that must have been an ubume." I'm not sure what I did see. Since then, no matter how often I look at that drab brown apartment, to this day I have never seen hide nor hair of anyone standing on the balcony of the second floor. Not that I would want to. But could it have been the spirit of a mother pining for her stillborn child? Or pining out of regret of having died herself in the process? All right, and that was from Steven, and he lives in Japan. And he said he's going to send me a photo of, I guess, the Buddhas, and maybe the apartment, I don't know. But if he sends it, I'll post it at anythingghost.com or on the VIP site if you have access to that. This next story is from a newspaper article in 1912. Violent Ghosts at Church of the Sacred Heart, 1912, South Hanover, Massachusetts. Ghosts, violent ghosts, have driven Reverend Charles F. Donahue and his household from the parish house of the Church of the Sacred Heart. According to his own story, furniture was dashed around and broken without any plausible explanation. Unseen hands have ripped bedclothes and played havoc with crockery and glassware. Father Donahue said he would not attempt to explain the strange phenomena. "I cannot account for it at all," he asserted. "For 2 weeks and longer the strangest things have been going on in the house, and Miss O'Connell, my housekeeper, is in such a state that she cannot remain in the place. I realize how it sounds, but it is true nevertheless, that I have seen pieces of furniture dashed to the floor and broken, with no possible explanation at hand. It's all very mystifying. Why, a few nights ago, I was compelled to sleep on a cot just outside the room where Miss O'Connell and Mrs. A.E. Horben and her daughter were sleeping, because they had been terrified by their furniture being dashed around the room in the dead of the night. I had placed my alarm clock on a stand nearby and barely crept into bed when the clock was hurled down the stairs, and placed it on the table, for it was still ringing. I had hardly gone to bed the second time before the clock was hurled across so violently that it was broken. It stopped at 5 minutes past 2 o'clock. After that, we all went downstairs to finish the night. The next morning, we found the beds upstairs torn apart and the bedclothes torn and ripped." Reverend Charles F. Donahue continued his work as a priest. At one point, a year after the ghostly activity, he saved a man's life who jumped from a bridge. A year later, in 1914, he had moved from the Church of the Sacred Heart and was working out of St. Patrick's Church in Lowell, Massachusetts. He'd only been at his new church for 2 months when he had to give up his duties due to what turned out to be kidney disease. The disease led to paralysis, and he was moved to and cared for at his mother's home. But soon he was sent to a hospital, where he passed away on May of 1914 at the age of 45. The next story comes to us from Tiffany in Canada. Big Scary Horse. This story happened on a cold winter day on our family farm in eastern Ontario, Canada. My son was around 2 years old. Our farmhouse sits on a long lane lined with ancient sugar maples. The lane was once an old road carrying on through the cow pasture to the ruins of an old mill. The home had been built sometime in the 1840s, but strangely the original 1819 farmhouse still stood along the old road less than 50 feet from our home. The 1819 house was eerily intact, but crumbling weathered gray. Inside was cramped, with flaking off 1800s wallpaper and iron hooks in the plaster ceiling for hanging cured meat and bunches of herbs. The old house had mainly been unoccupied since the 1930s, with the last occupant living there when a farmhand resided there briefly in the 1950s. By the time of this story, The house had been sitting still and empty for decades, and it still sits there today. After several days of snowstorms, it was a cold and sunny winter afternoon. I had taken my son outside to play and made a giant snow mound in the yard near the old farmhouse. We had packed this down, and I was helping him use his little sleigh to slide down the snow mound. He was delighted with this new activity and was laughing and happy. Suddenly, as I was helping him up the mound for another slide down, he stiffened his face, filled with fear. Terrified, he grabbed my hand and ran for the house. It was the first time I'd ever seen him like that. Once inside, he peered fearfully out the window, looking out into the yard at the old house. And then suddenly, he ducked down behind the window in terror, as though something had seen him. He darted away and hid. He refused to come out and refused to go outside again. When I asked him what he'd seen, he looked at me and said, "Big scary horse." And he kept repeating, "Big scary horse," when I pressed him further. I had not seen anything, and there were no tracks in the snow. Later, after he was calmer, over a snack, I asked him, "What did Big Scary Horse look like?" He looked at me solemnly and said, "He's big and white and wears a hat." It seemed odd, but we moved on and didn't speak about it again. He refused to play anywhere near the old house after that, and seemed watchful and fearful any time we went even slightly close. Winter changed to spring, and one day I was out in the early spring sunshine near the old house, in the spot where my son had stared on that winter day. The grass had not yet grown, and there, revealed by the frost-flattened grass and the melted snow, was the partially buried, rusted remains of a walking plow. A walking plow is an old iron plow that farmers hitched to their big workhorses to plow the fields. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered that day. Then I remembered two more things. An old photo of the wagon from the 1830s at our farm, pulled by a big white workhorse, and a childhood memory of my grandfather carefully cutting ear holes in an old straw hat and showing me how to put it on our pet donkey during the hot summer days, just like he did for the heavy workhorses working the fields when he was young. The event was so strange and chilling. My son and I didn't know the plow was buried in the dirt and grass. He didn't watch TV, and his books had no images of anything like Big Scary Horse. In fact, my friend had horses, and my son enjoyed visiting them. They were smaller, black and brown horses, and nothing like the image of Big Scary Horse that he described. He wasn't fearful of those horses, as he was of this horse. That was what frightened me so much, his visible terror and fear. I genuinely believe he saw something that day that I could not see, and that frightened me. And thank you, Tiffany in Canada, for Big Scary Horse story. In the past, we've had a lot of ghost pet stories, and this is just an addition about a ghost horse. I hope you enjoyed it. For any new listeners out there, I mentioned earlier that there's a VIP group, and that's where it's a website where I house the complete archive of Anything Ghost. For more information, go to anythingghost.com, join VIP. anythingghost.com, join VIP.
Hi, Lex and everybody. This is Kate from New York City, and Anything Ghost was the very first podcast I ever listened to. and I've been a big fan ever since. So I want to tell you about an experience I had that there were no scary voices, noises, no apparitions, but here's what happened. I had just graduated from college and got my first job and my first apartment. And at the time, I was really into the Russian novelists, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy especially. So I had their books all lined up on my IKEA bookcase. And another book I had was Sonia, which was the biography of Tolstoy's wife. She had just a heck of a life with this guy. Not only did she have 13 children, but she was maybe his secretary. His writing was so tiny and illegible that printer refused to take it as he presented it. So she took on the job of transcribing that tiny illegible writing into something that the printer would accept. So if you can imagine sitting down and writing out War and Peace or Anna Karenina, to just name a couple, I can't imagine doing that. Not only that, but on top of her responsibilities with her 13 children, she did all of this at night with candles and lantern light. It was very hard on her health. So she must have had a lot of resentment. Well, one evening I got home from work and Sonia was on the floor a good 4 or 5 feet away from the bookcase. I just couldn't imagine how that book scooted itself out and flew 4 or 5 feet and landed on the floor. I really wish I had been there to see it. The cat was there. She saw the whole thing, but you know how cats are. She just gave me the side eye and walked away. So I mentioned it the next day at work, and this guy said, "Oh, you had a poltergeist." I had never heard that word before, but it really opened up a new world of the supernatural and the paranormal that I'm still just really interested in right to this day. So thanks so much. I wanted to tell you too that when I picked up the book, I gave it a pat and said, "Okay, my friend, I won't put you back there." And I put her on the shelf with Charles Dickens, and she seemed to be pretty happy there with Great Expectations. So thanks again, Lex, and everybody take care.
Okay, thank you, Kate, for the poltergeist story. And that makes 2 poltergeist stories for this episode. Next up is a story from, let's see, who is this? Liz in Glen, Cove, New York. Aunt Helen. My husband, son, and I live in a small 1920s bungalow where my mother-in-law grew up with her sister Helen. Aunt Helen was a beloved character to my husband and his brothers. She never married and was over at their house for dinner several nights a week. She was quick with a joke, and they all adored her. She lived in the house until she passed away in her sleep in 1999. A few months after Aunt Helen passed away, we moved in. Her presence was very strong. There was a lifetime of possessions to sort through, and the house smelled like her, too, a combination of Parliament cigarettes and Jean Nate. Aunt Helen was a huge Judy Garland fan. On one of our first days in the house, I was boxing up all of her belongings for my mother-in-law to go through. She had one of those Hallmark Snoopy statuettes that played music when you wound it up. This one played her favorite song, Over the Rainbow. The thing is, I discovered this without winding it up. I was looking through old Judy Garland souvenir magazines when I heard the song playing from the windowsill. I looked over to see Snoopy slowly rotating, but neither my husband nor I had touched it. We looked at one another and laughed, but both of us had the supernatural shivers and goosebumps at that moment. Aunt Helen's room, where she had died in her sleep, became our office. Often when one of us was in there on the computer, we would hear footfalls right outside the door and a small intake of breath. We'd look up thinking that the other one of us was entering the room and were about to speak. A few years later, the office became a nursery, and our son Joe was on the scene. We had one of those video monitors on his crib, and there were always two rather large floating orbs around his head when he slept. Maybe dust, but always two orbs. And we couldn't help but think it had to be Aunt Helen and Molly, my husband's grandmother, and Joe's great-grandmother. One night while I was sitting quietly in the glider next to his crib, feeding him his 3 a.m. bottle, I heard the tinkling sound of Brahms' lullaby behind me. It was a snow globe of a baby in a cradle with an angel looking on. We had gotten it as a Christmas gift. The inscription read, "An angel to watch over me." I hadn't gone near it. The song played for only a few moments, and in those moments I knew for sure that our house was haunted, but in the best possible way. We still heard footfalls outside of his room for a while, and baby and toddler Joe would sometimes look past us and smile at someone we didn't see. But that would just make us smile too. It's been a while since we've seen or heard anything, but we still love our little bungalow, and we're grateful to the family for making us feel so welcome here.
Hey Lex, this is Marco in San Jose. I wanted to tell a few little stories about time that I lived in Pilsen, Chicago, the early 2010s. I was undergoing training at that time to become a ballroom dance instructor. I was a newbie being trained by wonderful staff at a prestigious dance company. Among them was, I'll call him Alex. Alex was a great teacher among the staff who became a great friend off the dance floor. I owe much of my dance talent to him. In our friendship, we spent our time being total goofballs, two dorks all the time. As the months passed, I finally joined the company with the team. 1 year in, Alex began to get sick and thinner and thinner. It breaks my heart to say that he didn't realize this illness that dragged on longer than the possible bug he thought he had would actually take his life in the form of cancer 1 year after I had met him. I was the last to dance with him actually on some Monday night as he walked out, shouting to him, "Alex, show me that waltz move I needed before you leave." And he showed me. We hugged goodbye, and 2 days later I got the call. The loss of a brother, that's what it felt like. You have to understand, dancers in a dance company grow very close, like a family. The weeks pass, and with him in our heavy hearts, we danced on. It's an odd feeling actually sharing what I'm going to share. Funny, even. It took me 12 years to decide to share this story because I felt it was too soon. But as the years have passed, I realized that Alex would tell me, "Dude, go for it." That's just the kind of Dorkville that we lived in. So let me tell you a little bit about the times Alex decided to, not be truly gone. When Alex passed away, we had 2 dance studios. One location was closing, and the new location was where we relocated to. The old studio was now closed, locked up, ready for deconstruction as it had been bought out by another company. If one somehow wandered in, it'd be dark, maybe gathering dust. The echo of every footstep, the acoustics, webs maybe, mirrors in every direction. The aura of one's majestic ballroom now resting silent in shadows. Typical eerie vibes, if you would walk in alone. The front desk, landline, phone still there, chairs, crates, you get the picture. We were at the new studio one idle Tuesday. The receptionist gets a call. Likely a customer per usual. "It's a wonderful day to start dancing. How can I help you?" she answered in employee fashion. No response. "Hello?" she repeated. She covered the mouthpiece to the phone and whispered to me and my coworker, "There's someone on the line. I can hear them breathing." We found that to be very unsettling. "Hello?" she repeated to the caller again. To no reply. She says to us again, "Guys, I can hear a person breathing, I swear." After 30 seconds, she hung up the call. "Check the number," I told her. And her eyes froze wide. "Who was it?" "Guys," she said, "the call came from the old studio." "That's impossible," we told her. "That studio has been locked shut for weeks. It's barren." She stood up. "Guys, this isn't funny. Are you guys messing with me? I heard breathing." We immediately agreed that we knew very well who had called us from the old studio. Summer came, and one night found me and my roommates in our kitchen, discussing a female that Alex and I met at a salsa club 1 month before his passing. He had hopes of getting to know her, but in his passing, they never got to even an official first date. I myself started to spend time with her, even beginning to have feelings for her, possibly. We joked in the kitchen with my roommates by the stove, in a dark kitchen lit only by a stovelight, about this gal whom Alex had interest in. They teased me about being a bad friend to Alex. "So what would Alex say?" they joked, and I said, "I don't think he'd mind." And the stove lights began to flicker on and off in the darkness. My roommates were terrified, and they started screaming. The lights stopped flickering, back to on. "Alex, if that's you, do it again," I said. Flicker, flicker, the lights went once more. Everybody was screaming, and well, me laughing because Alex was always a dork and would so do something like that to mess with us. This is where things get really interesting, though. Flash forward a few months. Nothing ever amounted with the gal past friendship with us. In fact, I was now dating someone else, John. He knew Alex, too. Now, it's important to mention that when Alex passed, I kept his favorite dance necktie. I took it from our dressing room from his station. I took it home and I placed it in my living room with a small altar I made for him with candles and a portrait of him, common in Latin culture. After a few months, I decided it was time to dismantle it and put everything away. I took his portrait into my room. I placed it under my TV set atop a bunch of business papers at the foot of my bed. His tie, I placed that in my closet with my other ties. This particular night, John stayed over, and we went to sleep. But around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of ruffling through papers at the foot of my bed. Rats, I thought, because it couldn't be. We don't have a rodent problem, I thought. Rustling and rustling through papers rather loud under my TV set. I tried to make nothing of it, not remembering that's where I had placed Alex's portrait. We woke up the next morning. John was alert. "Marco, I have to tell you what happened yesterday night. I didn't know if I should tell you because I don't want to offend or disrespect, but it really scared me," John told me. Before he could tell me his experience, I told him about the rustling by Alex's portrait and the papers. "That's funny you say that," John said. So what follows is John's account of the events. "Marco, last night we were sleeping and I was sleeping on the left side of the bed against the wall. You, Marco, were sleeping on the edge of the bed facing the room, and the closet and door. You were in a heavy sleep. I woke up 3 times last night between 3 and 5 a.m. The first time I was facing the wall sleeping, but when I woke up and turned over to my left, in the dark, there was a man standing in the closet space where the closet was open. He was just staring at us. I couldn't make out the face much, but as soon as I saw him, I turned right back around and tried to go back to sleep. When I woke shortly after that again, I was scared to turn around, but I thought I'd give it a try, so I rolled over to my left towards you, and I saw Alex sitting at the edge of your bed. He was sitting right next to you. One hand was holding himself up on the bed space between us, and the other hand like on his lap. He was just watching you sleep. You laying between his arm and his waist. He was kind of see-through, like transparent, kind of blue, hazy color, but still a little dark. I said, heck no, and I turned back to face the wall and tried my best to go to sleep again because that was terrifying, Marco. And the final time when I woke up, I didn't even roll over fully. I barely got myself to even glance over my shoulder, and there he was. Alex's head, just his head, was floating over your head while you were sleeping, Marco. It's as if he was face down like a massage table, but it was only his head, no body, no torso, like same transparent blue, see-through, hazy kind of looking. It was just floating there over your head, and I definitely decided to designate myself to face the wall for the rest of the night. That was John's account. We told my roommate James that morning, and to everyone's surprise, my roommate James said, "Guys, I passed out drunk last night when I got home at 2 a.m. I plopped down by where his altar was on the couch. I woke up at like 3 a.m., still kind of drunk, but I definitely saw a shadowy man standing over me right there. He towered over me, and he looked like he was getting bigger and bigger. I was way too drunk, so I just said, and I passed out again." That's what James said. Alex appeared to almost everyone in the household that night. It was scary to most, but actually funny and endearing to me, and it kind of feels odd saying that. The final visit I experienced was at his family's house. I stayed for a weekend before I moved out of Chicago. With his sister, we sat on the couch in the basement where Alex had his bedroom by. We shared beautiful memories and shed tears of sadness together, missing him. Out of nowhere, we witnessed an orb of light like an electrical spurt zooming to and fro past us over our heads. I'm familiar with what orbs are, so I knew what it was. His sister wasn't, and she was confused as to how to react. It was such an intense burst of electric charge type light. It was truly supernatural. Alex, if you're listening, I hope you finished your hauntings, dork, and have moved on to dance more waltz numbers, wherever you are. Guys, if you haven't already joined the Anything Goes VIP group, I really recommend it. I joined a few years ago. There's some stuff on there that's archived. Well, every single episode is archived, but when you listen to some of these decade-old episodes, for instance, there's this one episode with a story, probably the story that has scared me the most. And my idiot me didn't even take note of what episode it was. But when you run into the one about the woman in the stairwell of some lobby or hotel mansion type place, I just hope you're not alone at night in the dark. Join the VIP. It's really worth it. You'll even actually run into 3 of my submissions in episodes 214, 217, and 222. Thanks for what you do, Lex. Thanks for listening, guys. And take care.
And thank you, Marco, for recording and sharing your stories. And if you want to share a story, you can record it like Marco did, or write it up and email it to lex@anythingghost.com. This final story is The Ghost of Belle Boyd, Washington, D.C., 1927. The capital's most famous spirit has left her usual habits. Those who knew her say she is gone for all time. They blame it on the United States Supreme Court. Just what the material matter-of-fact Supreme Court has to do with apparitions may not be clear to the lay mind, but those who have had contact with Belle declare she is angry at judges. Shortly after it was decided to tear down the old structure where Belle ruled over a ghostly court to clear the site for a new Supreme Court building, she disappeared. Other spirits vanish. With her went her cohorts, the shades of Mrs. Surratt, Anne Royale, and Major Wirt. She will never return, a woman who claims to have had intimate association with the ghost of Belle Boyd declared. Belle was an earthbound spirit. She haunted the old building, where she was held prisoner because her mind was most tortured while she was there. When the Supreme Court decided to take her building, untimely to raise it to the ground, she became angry. Her earthly chains were broken, and she fled. Belle Boyd, a beautiful Southern woman, was imprisoned as a Confederate spy during the Civil War. There is a story that her entertainment of General Nathaniel Banks and his staff officers assisted Stonewall Jackson in defeating Banks' army in the Shenandoah Valley. The old building, erected as a temporary capital after the capital was burned by the British in 1814, now used as a headquarters for the National Women's Party, was converted into a prison during the war, and Belle Boyd was imprisoned on the second floor. The room which she used is still called the Belle Boyd Room. Other noted prisoners incarcerated in the building were Mrs. Surratt, executed for her involvement in the assassination of President Lincoln, and Major Wirt, notorious commandant of Andersonville Prison. Wirt was hung in the building, as were several Confederate spies. For years, according to legend, the ghost of Belle Boyd inhabited the old building. Many people declared they saw or heard her. One woman, while in the ranks of the National Women's Party, who slept in the Belle Boyd room, described her appearance as follows. I was sleeping when I felt someone shake my bed. I opened my eyes, and beside the bed was a beautiful woman dressed in garments of the Civil War times. She smiled at me. I was not frightened. She moved over to the window, the same window where she sat for so many weary hours during her prison life. I could see the moon shining through her. Then she walked on silent feet back to the bolted door and faded through. According to others who claim to have seen her, Belle was never a violent ghost, always appeared with a wistful smile, and never created undue commotion. Those of more material minds who lived in the building credit the Pennsylvania Railroad Tunnel, which runs directly under the structure, as the creator of Belle Boyd manifestations. However, they cannot account for the fact that no one has seen her or heard the ghostly sounds since the Supreme Court decided it wanted Belle's favorite haunting grounds for a new building. And that's the story of Belle Boyd's ghost. I hope you enjoyed that one. And that's it for Anything Ghost number 312. Immediately I'm putting together show number 313, and I'll get that out as soon as I get enough stories. So if you have something you would like to include in show number 313, please send it to lex@anythingghost.com. Until then, have yourself a wonderful week and take care.